Hello everybody. This lecture is going to go over some codes which would go over the arrays chapter or the array unit that we discussed in class. In class we had gone over the concepts and we used the chapter PowerPoint as a reference. In here what I would like to do is show you some codes and go over the codes to see how the arrays are being utilized or used in programs. So the program that you see, let me read the program. It is actually one of the programs coming out from the book, and the program asks you to write an application that would accept up to 20 strings. Then we are supposed to divide them into two lists, one for short string and the other one for a long string. The short string, the limit is 5 characters or fewer, and the other part would be the long string, which is anything more than 5 strings or more. After we intake the data, prompt the user to enter which type of string to display. So the user inputs if they would like to see the long string or the short string, and depending upon the input it is going to display the short strings or the long strings. Some of the limitations of this program are it has to accept up to 20 strings, and it would give you it would have a quitting command, which is you have to type in QQQ, and then depending upon your input of either you want to display the short or the long, it's going to show it on the screen. So let's go through the code. Let me first start my line numbers. The first few lines, 1 through 5 or 6 over here is my package, my class, my main method, and then from 6 until 11 I actually have different kinds of variables that I have declared. The first one being a constant, which is max, the second one being another constant depicted by the syntax final. Cutoff is 5, and then also the string, this is my indication to quit, ZZZ. Then I have more variables. One of them is a string variable called entry. The other one is a short sub and a long sub. Both of them are initialized at 0. Of course, line number 12, I created an input object which is of the type scanner or scanner class, and you have seen that before. Also, you have two arrays. One array I'm calling it long strings, and the other one is short string. As you can see over here, at this point you do not have a max. Well, your max is 20 over here. You do not have a number. Instead of a number, you're actually bringing in the size of that array. So basically you're creating two arrays, long string and short string. They're both of string type, and they can hold up to 20 strings. Then you have a system out, enter the string. So you are asking the user to input the string, or quit, and remember my quit constant value is ZZZ, so it's going to display enter a string or ZZZ to quit. Okay, you are taking the value in with this next line method on the input. So input is my object, and then I'm associating the next line method, which is which goes with the input object, and it is storing the value in entry. Then I have a while statement, and my condition is while not equal entry. So this particular value that I have stored, as long as this value dot equals quit. So as long as it is not equal to quit, that is my syntax over here, not equals quit, and the short stub plus the long sub. Remember, the short sub was 0 and the long sub was 0 at this point. So 0 plus 0, so as long as they are less than the max. Remember, my max is 20. So I cannot go over 20. So that's my condition over here. So while this condition is true, which is it is not a quit and it is less than max, the next line is a conditional statement where I say if entry dot length. So remember, entry is my variable that I have stored my string, and the length is now telling me what the length of that array is less than equals cutoff, and cutoff, remember, is 5. That's how I am separating the long from the short. So the first one I'm saying if that length is less than equals 5, then I am going to add that entry into my short string array. Okay, and at this point short sub is 0 because I defined that one as 0. Okay, so my first element, I'm going to input that value, and I am going to then increase my short sub by 1. So plus plus 1 is adding to it. But if this entry dot length is not equals cutoff, then I catch this else statement where I now take that string and now store it in the other array, which is called long strings, and long sub is the element that I'm storing. And of course, in that case, I'm going to increment my long sub. So basically, the value that I am inputting, depending upon the cutoff, I'm storing them either in the short sub, short string, or on the long strings, and the element value or the indexes are given by the short sub and the long sub. Okay, so pretty easy, clever way of taking the values in. Now let's see, how do I find out about the next part? So now I'm saying as long as my short sub and the long sub, remember my value is 20, so I cannot go over 20. So I'm still checking this condition if my short plus long sub is less than equals max, because remember I am going to increment my short sub and the long sub over here. So I might, you know, include 3 or 4, but then this has to be the combination, or the addition of these two has to be less than 20, because I cannot go more than 20. So if it is less than max, then I say system out, enter a string, or quit, or ZZZ to quit. So this is basically my way of coming back and asking them again if you want to input another string, and my condition is it has to be less than 20. So this one would continue as long as I do not input a quit and it is less than 20. Okay, short plus long is less than 20. Then I have a system out print line to see what is it that you would want to display, a list of short string or a list of long string, and you are looking now for a character. Enter S or L. All right, so you can input an S or short. So it is now looking for the input dot next line. So this is the way I would take the value in next line and store it in this variable called entry. I am now running a substring on that string that I just inputted and stored in entry. My substring, my method substring 0 and 1. Remember, this is the beginning of my string and this is the end of my string. So in this entire string, I'm looking for just one part. Okay, starting with 0 and ending in 1. Okay, so if my entry dot substring 01, and then I'm going to lowercase, I'm going to change that to a lowercase, is equal to S. So if it is short, okay, now somebody might have inputted SHORT in big cap letter, but with this one I'm going to change it to lowercase. So if I'm looking for a substring in that word that I inputted, if it is equal to S, then I'm going to call this method called display, and I'm going to call the array with the index value that I want to pass it. So short string comma short stub or long string long stub. Now let's look at the display method. So display method would accept an array, okay, an entire array, and also pass an integer value, which could be given by the long sub or the short sub. Okay, so then once I go inside, I would print line, and as long as my max equals 0, I say system out print line, the list is empty. But if not, okay, I'm going to the else, and then I'm going through that array that I just created, and remember this is my array, so I'm either passing the short stub, a long string, or the short string array. So once I pass that array in, with this for loop, I'm going to go through the individual elements and display the array list. So if I inputted 2 or 3 arrays, then that's what I'm going to display. So that's my program, which would accept up to 20 strings, and I can break it up, or I can divide that up into a long string and short string. So let's now go ahead and run this program to show how this is going to work. So now it says enter a string. I would like to take more classes at DSC. Another one, hello there. Another one, I am having trouble in some of my classes. Another one, good morning. Another one, let's say I don't want to do it anymore, so my quit command is ZZZ. So at this point it says, do you want to see the short list of short string or long string? So I said short. Okay, and this point it says the list is empty. Okay, let me run this again. Okay, and I want to go to school. Hello, I am having trouble in reading my homeworks. Good night, and ZZZ. Okay, now I want to see if I want to see a short list or a long string. So I'm going to say S. Now I see that I have a list of the short strings. If I would have, let me run this one more time just to show you the other kind. So if I do I want to go to school at DSC, but I don't want to take night classes. Hello, what are you saying? And let's see, Z. At this point I say L, and then I see I want to go to school at DSC, but I don't want to take night classes. What are you saying? Okay, so I just showed you the various ways of working this program, where basically it would accept a string up to 20, and then depending upon I have 5 or more, I would have the string divided into short or long. Okay, let's look at another code, and again this is a programming exercise coming out of the book, and this is 6, and this part is the A, and this, it actually has two parts, 6A and 6B. The one that I had done earlier is coming again from the book, and that was number 5. So let me read the program first. So it is asking you to create a class named salesperson, and the data fields for salespersons include an integer ID number and a double annual sales amount. We need to include some methods, which include a constructor that requires values for both data fields, as well as get and set methods for each of the data fields. Then we are supposed to write an application named demo salesperson that declares an array of 10 salesperson objects. Set each ID number to 9999 and each sales value to 0. Display the 10 salesperson objects. Save the files as salesperson.java and demo salesperson. So that's the first part. And then in the second part, we are supposed to modify the demo salesperson application for each salesperson and has a successive ID number from 111 through 120. So previously we were storing the ID number as 9999 for every single person and setting their values, their sales values to 0. This time we are setting the values differently, starting with 111, going through 120, and the sales values are starting from 25,000 to 70,000, increasing by 5,000 for each successive salesperson. Okay, so in this one we are going to save this one as demo salesperson 2. So basically we are asked to create a class with some get set methods and some constructors, and then declare some object and create an array where you would create an array with a set number, and then create another demo salesperson, or create another application which is going to create another array with different ID numbers and different sales values. Okay, so pretty simple program, and what you see over here, let me bring the line numbers, is the class salesperson. You have your private int ID and double sales. These are my two variables. Remember, my salesperson is my constructor, and this particular one takes two arguments, ID number, which is an integer, and an amount, which is double. Once you create this salesperson, automatically the ID number that you had inputted is going to be setting up the ID, which is the private value, and the amount that you have inputted when you call that constructor is going to be set as the sales amount. Now this is my first constructor, and apart from the constructor which is going with the default over here, I also have created some get and set methods. So I would, since I have my private variables declared, through my get ID I'm going to retrieve the ID that I have stored. Through my get sales, I'm going to retrieve my sales value that I have stored. And of course the set ID and the set sales is going to set the ID number and set the sales amount. So again, ID number is the one that I'm passing when I call the set ID, and set sales, the amount is the one that I am passing. So this is just my class, which is my prototype of my class salesperson. All right, let's now click on the demo salesperson, and this one is a pretty simple one which has a main method. So let me show the line numbers. So my class demo salesperson, my main method, and inside my main method I declared the salespeople array. Okay, so this salespeople array is actually of the type of the class salesperson. Okay, now remember, I created a salesperson class before, which is an array, so that's why I say salesperson, and salespeople is my object, which is of the type or array type salesperson. So new salesperson, so I create 10 of those objects. Okay, inside I define my integer I, and then I have a for statement where I say int I equals 0, starting with my my counter value. I is less than salespeople.length. So of course, as long as it is less than 10, then I'm going to come in salespeople I, okay, equals new salesperson 999.0, which means this 9999 is going to be my ID, and my amount, the sales amount, is going to be 0. But I would create 10 different objects of the salespeople type. Okay, so this is going to be my, those 10 different objects are going to be given by my subscript that I have created over here. So first one is going to be 0, the next one is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and such. Okay, so that's how I'm calling that constructor called salesperson and passing these two values, which would set the 9999 to be my ID and my 0 to be the amount. And then I have a for statement, basically again doing the same thing, setting up a counter, and the condition is salespeople dot length, which is trying to get my length of the salespeople array. And then I'm going to output the salesperson I, which has an ID of salespeople I dot get ID. Okay, so I'm going to get my get ID and the annual sales of salespeople I dot get sales. So these are my get ID and my get sales are my two methods that I had created in my salesperson class, which is going to work on this object called salespeople, and this is just an array. Okay, so if I run this program, then it shows me that I have created salesperson 0, which has the ID 999 and an annual sales of 0. Of course, the second one, which is my first element of the first salesperson array object, and this one has an ID 9999 and annual sale of 0. So by writing this for statement right over here, by writing this for statement in 7 and 8, I am assigning these values and creating 10 of those arrays, and by the for statement that goes from 9 until 12, I'm actually extracting the values from that array that I just created with those values and displaying their values. Let's look at the demo salesperson 2. Remember, in here the only difference is my salespeople ID is going to be changing, starting with 111 and then incrementing, and then my sales value is going to start at 25,000 and keep on increasing by $5,000 increment. So very similar to what you had seen before. And in here you have your salesperson, salespeople. Remember, this is my class, and this is the object, salespeople object, which is again an array object, and I'm going to create 10 of them. And I do the same thing. My initial assign ID is not 999 anymore. It starts with 111, and then my assigned sales starts with 25,000, and my final sales increase every time you go to the next one, it's going to increase by 5,000. So I do the same thing for I equals 0, I less than salespeople dot length. I come in and I now create this new salesperson with the assign ID and the assign sales. Assign ID starts with 111 and assign sales starts with 25,000, and then you add 1 to the assign ID and another 5,000, which is defined by the sales increase, to the assigned sales. So your ID goes up by 1 and your sales goes up by 5,000. So now you're going to create 10 of those arrays, starting with ID 111 and starting with the sales value of 25,000, and the next one is going to be 112, and your next sales value is going to be 30,000 now. So this statement over here, your for statement, is going to basically go through that array that you just created, array object, and then print out the array object individual elements by using these methods called get ID and get sales. Okay, so if I run this now, you will see that my ID over here starts with 111 and my value starts with 25,000, and then it goes to and adds 1 to the ID and then 5,000 to the sales amount. So by writing this code, I am actually creating an array object and then putting some value in those array elements. Okay, let's look at another code, and this one I'm going to use parallel arrays to do some comparison. This one again is an example, is a programming exercise from the book, and this one is number 10, and this one, let me read the the programming exercise first. This one is asking us to write an application which contains 3 parallel arrays that would hold 10 elements each. The first array would hold 4-digit student ID. The second one would hold their first names, and the third one would hold their grade point average. We would use dialog boxes to accept the student ID, and if we do find the student ID, then we would display the corresponding name that goes with that ID along with the GPA that goes with that ID. Okay. If we do not find that ID, then it should be giving me an error saying it is an invalid ID number and I cannot find it. Okay, and we would save the file as studentIDarray.java. Now this is a good example to do because we kind of talked about it in class. We talked about how parallel arrays can be more than 2. However, it needs to be arrays, or it can be multiple arrays. It could be 3 or 4 or 5, but all of them need to have the same elements or the same size, because you're trying to correspond one with the other, or one element with the other element. Okay, so let me view the line numbers. So here we start with the Java Swing, which is my package to bring in my GUI interface, and then I have a class and then my main method, and then I have an ID num. This is an array of integer type, and this one has values that we are already setting in. These values are hard-coded. Okay, now you could write a way where you could actually create an ID with a bigger size and then ask for users to input this ID. So you can make this program interactive by doing this, where instead of hard coding this value, or you can ask the user to input the value. But this program, the intention is different. The intention is to create 3 different arrays and try to correspond the ID with the name and the GPA. So the next one is an array which is of this type string. So now it can hold these values. So now I can hold up to these individual values. So I can find out the length of this ID num by just running in an ID num.length. The same thing I can do with this names array and my GPA array. So the first one is integer array, the second one is a string array, and the third one is a GPA array. As you can see, these are all parallel arrays and they should all have the same number of elements, or the same size. Next, I have a string entry and a message, which is enter an ID number. So this one, even this one, I basically am going to call this message to get this enter an ID number. I have an int num x, so these are my 2 variables, num and x, and then I have an isFound Boolean variable, and it's set to false. Okay, so the first one, I start with while not equals found, which means I'm changing this one to true. So I say, as long as I find this ID over here, okay, then I'm going to entry, and I say J option pane null and message. So this is where I used to do my string. So I have created a variable called string. So now I can say null message. So I'm going to come back and say enter an ID number at this point, and whatever the value is, I'm going to store this in entry right now. So remember, that is going to come in as a string. Okay, since it's coming in as a string, I'm going to use this parseInt method, which is of the integer class, and change that entry that comes in, and now store that value as an integer that I had defined in line number 15. Okay, so I'm going to store it in this variable called num. Now I write a for loop, and I start my my counter with 0, and my counter is less than ID nums.length. Remember, ID nums is my array over here. Okay, so I need to make sure that this is less than the length. Okay, because I want to go through the individual element. And now I say if num equals id num x. So remember, I am asking them to input an ID. So if this value, let's say 1732 that I inputted, okay, is equal to one of the values within this ID number string, okay, if it is included in one of these things, then I'm going to change my variable to true and come up with a message saying JOptionPin show message null, okay, centering it, and then my ID number, and then I'm extracting the same element from the names array. This is my names array, and again using the same subscript to extract the value from the GPA, which is my double array over here. Okay, once I do that, I give id nums.length is equal to x. Okay, so then I would come out of this for loop by assigning that. So what is happening is I'm going to start looking for the array over here through id nums.length, but as soon as I find something, I'm going to change it to my true value, display this message, and then set my value so that it comes out immediately. However, if I do not find that, okay, if not equals found, then I'm going to come back with this message saying sorry, no student ID. So if I input a value which I don't find, then I'm going to say I cannot find this value over here. So here is my while. It starts over here and ends over here, and this is going to continue as long as is found is not equals false, which means is found is true. Okay, so if you run this, this is what you're going to get. It's going to come back and ask you for an ID number. Okay, so right now I know these are some of the IDs, and if I input, let's say 157895, okay, it's not one over here, so it should give me an error message, and it says yes, sorry, no student ID is found, enter an ID number. Okay, so basically it says cannot do it. So then remember, this is still within my while loop, so that's why it comes back and say enter an ID number with this message right here, this entry message right here, null and message. Now let's input a value, and if I know a value 1834, so this is the value that I'm inputting. So oops, 1834, and now 1834 corresponds to Johnny, which is 1 over here. Okay, so that's 0 1 2 3 fourth element, so 0 1 2 3 fourth element, and 0 1 2 3 fourth, which is 3.6. so now my GPA is 3.6. so once I find that ID, I'm going to say that's the name of the student and that the GPA is 3.6. Once I do OK, that's all it would take to create 3 parallel arrays and find a correspondence.